President Trump toured the Palisades fire devastation. He was threatening California, but by the end of the visit, he seemed to have changed his tune.
We absolutely need your help. We need the federal help.
You've got it. I told you. You will have no permit problem. There will be zero delay. I'm going to give you everything you want. I'm going to give you more than any president would have ever given you. We're going to override all of permitting.
Well, that sounded pretty promising. Quite a flip-flop from his previous comments. To talk more about this mixed messaging, I'm joined by Politico's California Bureau Chief, Chris Cadelago. Always good to have you. Soon after this roundtable ended on Friday, you and your colleague Melanie Mason, who appears here on the Fox 11 News at 6 o'clock, you wrote an article headlined, "Trump, longtime California antagonist, praised state during LA fires visit. He hasn't praised California in a very long time." Chris, what do you make of this apparent about-face, and do you expect it to last?
So you're right. It had been quite some time since the president has said anything really nice about California, particularly about its policies and its elected leaders. But this is different. He's president. He knows that a lot of people are relying on him to come through with federal disaster aid, to lead the locals and the state in terms of pushing for permitting to be expedited and for the recovery to really start. And there's a number of motivations here for Trump. I mean, we've talked about it on your air a lot. We've written about it a lot. The Olympic Games in 2028, the 2026 World Cup. These are sort of the ways in which Trump looks at this. He also has some personal connections to some of the burned areas. Obviously has some folks on his staff, some folks within his orbit who really want this area to be rebuilt, really want LA to come back. And so that's kind of the difference between being on the sidelines and being president. And, you know, we need to consider the idea that some of these things Trump is asking for, maybe not all of them, but some of these changes to water policy, maybe not something like voter ID, he will want to see some work on those, maybe some sort of compromise with the state in exchange for helping out. It may not be presented as a deal, but knowing Donald Trump enough, knowing the president, watching him, having covered him, he is not going to quickly move off of these demands on water in particular. And so we will hear what the next step is. But certainly what we saw Friday was a re-engagement, and he sort of kick things off again, pick things up with the mayor and particularly with the governor, Gavin Newsom, who he hadn't spoken with since 2020.
Yeah, well, let me get your thoughts on that. We know that Governor Newsom met him on the tarmac. They were friendly. That was an interesting view, just to see this moment, a handshake and the hug. And Melania also greeted Newsom nicely as well. What about this relationship? Do we expect this to be, you know, their problems solved?
I don't think this is one that's you're ever going to be able to call solved. There are going to be so many policy areas where the state of California and the federal government are on a collision course. Everything from immigration to health care, to a lot of climate policies where the state and Trump's administration are very much not on the same page. And those are the sorts of things you're going to see legal fights over. I sort of see that as separate from the personal relationship which Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom have had for quite some time. It's been kind of rocky. It's been off and on. And from Trump's perspective, I mean, look, you had Newsom, who was one of the top surrogates for Democrats, first Joe Biden, then Kamala Harris, at every one of these debates, all over Fox News, you know, really going hard after Trump. And so from Trump's perspective, like, you know, Newsom spent the last couple of years going pretty hard on him. And so him reconnecting with Newsom, talking about how they need to come together for this recovery, I think was a very first step in getting this back on track. But there will just be so many other issues that come up as they're working on disaster relief, as they're working on recovery, that test this relationship and really test whether Newsom wants to use Trump as a punching bag, as someone that he could pivot off of when he's talking about the state, or whether he looks at these as more less of a personal issue, if he personalizes it less. And you still see the state and the federal government suing each other in court and still really after each other But how does this relationship go on with Trump and Newsom, and can they kind of keep talking?
Of course, because as we know, Newsom has been working hard to Trump-proof California. And it's also worth noting that Newsom was not, that's where it ended at the tarmac. He was not invited to tour the Palisades, and nor did he take part in the roundtable when there was plenty of other local officials and state officials as well. Chris Cadelago with Politico, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for being with us tonight at 6.
Thank you.